Great. So on Thursday, we're going to have our industry news presentations. I've put up, I think, just about everybody I've heard from, but there was a couple of people I snapped a picture and the camera had some kind of lag or something, so I got a nice shot of like this from there down. So does anybody see that they've volunteered to do something and they're not up there right now? I think everybody's. I know Dylan volunteered for something, and I failed to shoot the picture on that. Anyhow, let me know if you don't see yourselves up there. However, for everybody streaming, the attendance is mandatory. On Thursday, we're all going to do these industry news presentations, and so let's just look over again the criteria so we get the best possible experience out of this particular assignment. Since this week we are talking about the industry and the business relationships that make up the industry, that's why we scheduled these presentations in the midst of all that. And this is interesting. So what you want to make sure, first of all, is that you're talking about something which has a certain impact on the industry. So this could range from regulatory, things changing with regulations. It could change with, for instance, a huge star like Bill O'Reilly stepping down from Fox because of sexual harassment. So scandal could impact. That's a guy who was making, I think, $23 million a year or something. He was so important to their bottom line. So that's a big deal, industry sense. A minor character joining your favorite show would not be very big in terms of industry impact. Mergers, acquisitions, one company buying another or companies fusing together, that's a big deal. A lot of people lose their jobs, and that can be a very large thing. Product releases, sometimes, kind of a new thing could be interesting. Oculus puts out a new headset, moving us further to VR or something. That could be fun and interesting. So when I say game changing, I mean they've got a pretty big impact on the business of broadcasting. And typically, if you're looking for news items, they're going to be discussing things which are important. The news tends to be about big companies doing big things, and so if you're going at this by looking through industry news articles, that's probably going to lead you to something good. Make sure you don't get fooled and do something that's 20 years old. You want to talk about something that is less than 2 years old. And maybe you should do a little additional search once you've decided, okay, that's really interesting news. There's going to be a merger. And if you look at it and it's a year and a half old, try to think, well, maybe something has happened sooner. So search around just for another couple minutes and see if you can get any newer news about it. Just make sure you haven't kind of fallen behind the story. And so that would be it. And then write it up in a way that you can say it comfortably, easily, in about a minute. And take note of the source. So put that on your script so you know where you got the information from. Hey, Dylan, I failed to snap a picture of what you were working on. Can you remind me of what?
The Time Warner.
It was Time Warner? Okay. All right, thanks. So we're just recapping on that, just saying how important it is to get something that's going to have a significant impact on the business and something current so it's not too old. And, it'll be pretty individualistic. Just everybody's going to have their moment with the microphone to say their news. And remember, you're pretending to be a kind of like a Bloomberg entertainment newscaster. You're actually standing up there doing your 60-second news report or thereabouts. We're not going to pull you off stage if it goes longer. But do your best to summarize so that we can understand what the most important stuff that you have to say is. It can ruin a presentation if you don't know how to pronounce somebody's name or something, so try to read it over in advance and see if there's stuff that's going to trip you up, So practice it a little bit and see if you need to learn the pronunciation of somebody's weird name or something like that. so that you don't kind of all get caught in the middle. And that's it. And then there's an example at the bottom, which is, a paste up of, just a 60-second thing. And that was the source. So you could see that I took, maybe like a 1,000-word newspaper article and boiled it down to that. So that's it. And then hopefully those who have not yet told me what they want to work on, not about anybody here, but anybody streaming, send me an email, let me know what you're working on. Jonah?
Is it only kind of like the news story, or can we put in like our opinion on it? Like,
Like your analysis of what the news means? That would be fine. Okay. Yeah, so there's going to be this merger, and then you want to go on and analyze it and say, well, this could be really huge because of this. That would be great.
Could we be like, I'm doing Apple, and they're only spending like $1 billion.
Is that all on TV shows?
Because Netflix spending like much more than that.
Yeah.
I can analyze that like in my own.
Yeah, I guess so. Sure. Yeah. It's odds are if it goes well, they'll spend more. Yeah. Good point. It's not like they're jumping in with the entire company to start with. This will be fun. I'm excited just to hear you guys with your questions. Any other questions? Okay. I do enjoy seeing you folks, and if there's any terminology that comes up, try to accommodate that. Duopoly and all kinds of things that we talked about today. I mean, it's just, you don't have to, but if it's in the news article that you look at, that'd be great. So let's leave the student view for a second. That's fun. That'll be coming up, and let's see here. On that, let's just want to talk about Cron 4 a bit while we're in the midst of all this. And Wikipedia is better than their own site for the history of it. And so today we'll look over these slides about Chapter 11, or is it Chapter 10? One sec. Let's see here. They're going to tell me Chapter 11. Media operations, and hang on a sec. No, it should be Chapter 10 that we're on. Got the wrong PowerPoints up. My goodness. Let's open reset. Chapter 8. Go for more. Media operations another time. So there's a few ways that we'll come at this. The most basic way is, how do these companies make money? That's first kind of topic. A little bit of history, and we heard this already, but just recapping again, that as the electronic media developed, they were searching around for different business models that could sustain content production, because you've got to put something out there to attract audiences, and to make the thing profitable as well. So I drew you a little triangle, and one way that the business figured out to finance itself was with getting together audiences. Let me put it, I can't remember what I drew it in. We had programmers who were giving programs to audiences, and advertisers who paid for it all. So that's a lot of the advertising sustained model of media that eventually came out to become the dominant model. We saw that develop from the 1920s. So early on they were thinking, radio is going to be wireless telegraphy, right? So there was the telegraph model where you charged literally by the word that was sent. The telephone model, which you'd pay a flat fee to be a part of the network, and we could still see that in terms of ISP. There's a fee for access that you can get onto the internet now, so that's still relevant. And then there were other models for generating revenue. The per set tax model, which is how the BBC is funded in England. If you buy a radio set, you have to pay, £15 a year or something in order to, they give that money to the BBC and their equivalent of the FCC as well to fund that. So there's a tax. We don't have that. The voluntary audience contribution model, what would that refer to that we've got? where do you always hear them begging for money from audiences? It's on the radio, it's on TV, subscription drives, a few times a year. Come on, you must have heard it. Yeah?
NPR.
Yeah, NPR, yeah, PBS, NPR. That's tiresome.
Radio, oh yeah, because it's like 20 minutes of news and then like the last like 10 minutes of the thing is just like them. I don't know how they do it. They're like talking on the radio and they just like keep like start talking about something and then always like bring it back to like the donate. It's
Yeah.
so annoying.
Yeah.
Like a few months ago, I couldn't even listen to the radio. For
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah, to their credit, KALW has been doing what they call silent ones or something, which is like they'll just say, and we're in the midst of our fund drive period, and to spare you the people begging for money, we're just going to ask you briefly to send us money, and you know, they actually had a fair amount of success with that. Like rather than, you know, eating up lots of time begging for money, they just do it quietly and then do the regular programming, and people contribute. Pretty good. So yeah, a lot of public media in the United States, it's a voluntary audience contribution model. I listen to a lot of podcasts by, it's a podcast publisher called MaximumFun.org. I don't know, they have dozens of podcasts. And they do a subscription drive, a voluntary donation drive as well, not subscriptions. Okay, toll broadcasting, so infomercials qualify. That's where you pay money to get your message out, straight up. And some television stations will do that in the middle of the night, just because it makes more sense to they make more money by selling, you know, ab crusher commercial time for a half hour instead of putting a program on they have to pay for, and then selling advertising in the middle of the night when it's like $10 for a spot. You know. Sponsorship model, we saw that was influential in television in the 50s. You know, you'd have the Kraft TV hour or whatever, and one sponsor would do that. And then we moved to the spot advertising model. Again, we've been over this, so we're just recapping basically, but you know, sponsors tried to exert content control. They got involved in too much, and the networks found also that they had more sales were made possible by selling, you know, small 60-second or 30-second spots rather than devoting an entire show towards to just one sponsor. So with little spots, you could sell a lot more to a lot more people. It was more profitable. So that was good. They moved to the spot advertising model. And then the subscription model is very common in cable TV, of course, where your premium cable, like HBO, you're still paying to subscribe to that. So the audience pays a fee to access the content. And there'd even be a kind of a Costco type of thing where, you know, you can pay a fee to have access, but still have to pay, let's say, a reduced price for certain things that you might want as you go along. So I haven't seen that come up too much, except maybe like an Amazon Prime type of model where, you know, you might get, you're paying a subscription fee through the year and getting access to a free library, you know, or perhaps maybe even reduced prices on certain stuff as well. Again, if you look at the options that you might have with a Hulu or something like that, I'm not sure. I think there's room there to exploit that a bit. But audience pays fees to access the content. And I was just talking to Sarah a little bit at the start of class about the particular interests that diverge between those who are using the spot advertising model and those using the subscription model. So let's, again, an example of subscription would be HBO is a great example. The spot advertising, let's just say CBS, right? So CBS needs Nielsen ratings in order to estimate the size of its audience, and that allows the advertisers to gauge how valuable the minute is on CBS. No commercials on HBO, so HBO has a big interest in sustaining the subscriber numbers. And there's something they call churn in broadcasting, which refers to people exiting and entering your subscriber base. So like if you're HBO, you're going to have many millions of subscribers. And that's pretty much going to determine your value as a company. People are always leaving because they decide, I'm going to cut the cord, I'm going to get HBO some other way or whatever. They leave your service, you need more people coming back in. So that's what they mean by churn. Some go out, more have to come back in. And there's a constant churn in the subscriber base. In order to keep them coming back, you have to keep on adding juicy things to bring people back in. So, wow, there's a new series with movie stars in it, or there's as Sarah was saying, a new documentary with a lot of interest and so on. So all of these big, interesting cultural events, things coming in, they help with subscriber churn. But after a year or two, it's no longer that interesting to keep them around because people get used to it, they get tired of it, and you have to come up with something else that's really big and interesting to keep them coming back. So HBO, you'll often find within 2-3 years, maybe 3 years, a show will probably, quite likely go off the air at that point. If they put the brakes on and keep the show on the air, like a Silicon Valley that's been around for quite a while, it may be because they don't have anything that they're ready to swap in there to get people coming back. They're making huge efforts with Westworld right now. And who knows if it'll really catch on. CBS, it's a different kind of need. What you need is, week by week, you need to get some people watching so that your ratings are high. So if you've got a favorite show, you keep a show around 7 years, 8 years, as long as it's returning decent ratings, because you're looking kind of like week by week how your show is doing and ready to cancel. So those are quite different, imperatives depending on the model that you pick. Whether you're going ratings and advertising, then you're looking week to week. If you're going subscriptions, you're looking to counter churn and keep people coming back in with high-profile, interesting programs. So that's just a couple of examples there of how your business model impacts the way you program, the way that audiences are appealed to as well. And even, so we're still a little bit in the historical area. The report on chain broadcasting, the fact that we're calling it chain broadcasting reminds us, okay, these are early days because eventually chain broadcasting was called networks, which is how we know them. And at a certain point in the 1940s, regulators saw that the networks had too much power. And they split up NBC, which led to ABC. So this network affiliate relationship is still a big deal in old school terrestrial broadcast. Take a look in there a little bit. We've known of CBS, ABC, and NBC since '45. There was Dumont, fourth network, which eventually couldn't sustain itself. And since the 1980s, Fox is another fourth network there. They call them the Big Four. And then, of course, there are smaller networks, of which the CW is definitely the leader. There's the Spanish language networks in the United States. They're very important, too. Big source of growth. And, the NBC and ABC have done sort of collaborative stuff where they're developing product for Spanish language audiences too. So it's a big area of growth in American broadcasting. Let's go on. Yeah, so looking through to the relationships of cable television and regular terrestrial broadcasting. Cable also faces the problem of churn, which is why cable operators are so aggressive about discounting. We'll give you a bundle of 3 services. We'll give you $100 for the first 2 years, and then it'll go up to like $250, which is what we usually, outrageous price we usually have. And then you can call them up and try to negotiate it down. So it's because they're responding to this problem of churn too. They want to have as many subscribers as possible. And we have seen a lot of consolidation, which is a tendency which is continuing now with the AT&T Comcast, the AT&T Time Warner merger, which was up there. So a few years back, it was Comcast and NBC Universal that were merging. That required, a fair bit of negotiation with the Federal Trade Commission, which looks to stop monopolies from happening, tries to keep industry competitive. So these big mergers will always be reviewed as they, the government tries to assess, like, what will be the impacts of letting these giant companies fuse? Will there be less competition? Will it eliminate a lot of jobs and hurt the economy? So they look at it that way. The little cable companies have been consolidating into bigger ones, huge behemoths like Comcast, like Time Warner. And so when one of those makes a move, you're, affecting 30% of the population as they merge and stuff. So here's a model of the key players and their relationships in the industry. This is called the broadcast star model. So looking at this, we recognize from my little triangle up here, which I'm always keeping things simple, but anyhow, network, producers, and advertisers, and audience. So, I would have bundled network and producers together as programmers. But those are the key there. The FCC, of course, the regulator, just keeping an eye on both the content and also making sure that the industry is competitive. And then syndicators, remember we talked about that, they're producing programs as well, but not within the network universe. They produce programs and sell them directly to local stations across the country. And then here it says Internet Video Delivery Services. So they receive programming both from syndicators, networks, and private producers, and they put it out to audiences. And of course, they also work with advertisers too. Broadcast star model, if you think about it as well, if you're thinking about CBS and their affiliates, they sell advertising. That's the way they make their money. If you look at a cable company like Comcast, they have subscriptions. They sell advertising. And they also have on-demand. So, you can order a movie or you can, watch a premium fight or something. So, if you're comparing old school broadcasting to cable, you can see cable has a lot of different revenue streams, which makes it more resilient and ultimately more profitable. Which is how we can come to the point where a cable operator, which used to be kind of laughed at, can buy networks, because they just did better with all of those revenue streams. So that's pretty much it. There's a fair bit of recap there about the regulators, because they do set the business rules as well, as to how many stations you can own in a particular market, that kind of thing. So FCC licenses. So let's see here. Just some of the interesting little tidbits about FCC licensing. If you want to own a broadcast station in this country, you have to be a citizen, which is why Rupert Murdoch, when he was setting up the Fox network, he's an Australian, but he got a U.S. citizenship, so he could own the Fox network of local television stations, the owned and operated stations. They'll also check out, character. They're going to make sure that you haven't been inciting, violence or something like that in your previous business activities and stuff, and that you haven't, for instance, if you as an individual have committed a felony, then you can't become an owner of a broadcast station. Those are significant restrictions. You got to be an American. You can't be have a criminal record and stuff. So that's important. Increasingly nowadays, if you're trying to get a broadcast license, there's so many players involved. They've started to auction them off. So early on in the history, they took applications and vetted, but more and more now, if you meet the minimal requirements, they're auctioning those licenses. It is hard now to lose your broadcast license. They used to review them every 4 years. I think it's now up till 8. So they don't even take a look at you on a very regular basis. There have been some threats to pull licenses, and of course you can get fined, but it's hard to lose your license. However, the FCC doesn't monitor employment practices, so it does monitor them. Sorry, and the public file is a file that every station has to keep on location that the public can consult if they want to find out, what frequency you should be on and certain other stuff about the station. So, broadcasting the business, station liabilities and such. I mean, maybe we could take a little break from these endless slides and look at our local TV station with quite almost a traumatic past, KronTV. So Kron was one of the original license holders in the Bay Area. Look at that. They started out, when did they actually start broadcasting? They brought KronTV on air on November 15th, 1949 as a full-time NBC affiliate. So it's been around for a long, long time. And the DeYoung family, who the museum in Golden Gate Park is their thing they created too. So very wealthy family, owned Kron for a long, long time. They decided they wanted to sell it around 2000. And it was an NBC affiliate. And at that time, NBC, and they still are, very interested in owning and operating their stations in the big markets like San Francisco. Because they want to, when you have a network affiliate relationship, it's kind of a 50-50 split in terms of the advertising time. The local station gets to advertise at particular times. The network advertises at particular times and inserts their ads, and they're shown locally. So it's 50-50 split. And in a big profitable market like the Bay Area, the advertising rates are really high. So you would like, as a network, to own that station that's in that nice big market. The little markets you don't care about. It's fine, you have affiliates. They don't make a lot of money out there, but in Bay Area, they would make a lot of money. So they wanted that station, NBC. And when DeYoung said, okay, we have an affiliate agreement out until 2001, and we want to sell this station eventually. NBC just figured, well, they'll sell it to us. We want it. It's a 50-year relationship that we've had between, DeYoung and NBC and Kron. So they were expecting to get it, and they bid about $800 million for it. But just before they closed, another East Coast company called Young Broadcasting, not DeYoung, but just Young, paid another $130 million on top. And so they wound up buying the station. Which displeased NBC. And Young Broadcasting, who is still the owner, they got it, and they had about a year left until the affiliate agreement with NBC expired. And when the affiliate agreement expired, they sat down to negotiate it again, as they would. And NBC demanded certain things that Young just couldn't live with. the first thing they demanded, which was very rare at that time, was they said, if you want to be our affiliate of NBC, you've got to pay us, NBC, $30 million in order to show NBC content. And Young said, whoa, that wasn't anything like what we used to do. You know, back in the day, you used to pay us. What happened? So they didn't like that. And NBC also said, you've got to rebrand from Kron to KNBC or something like that. So that was going to be they were going to use their call letters. So that didn't sit right. So Kron eventually became an independent broadcaster, independent local station, which is really tough to make a go for it because you don't get all of the programming that everybody wants to watch. So to fill some gaps, they became they do a lot of local programming, local shows. They also what's it called? My network is during prime time. Kron shows shows that are that are part of this thing called My Network, which is actually a Fox subsidiary. So it's put together and organized by Fox. So there you go. Young eventually went bankrupt in part because of this purchase, which, you know, they had a huge amount of debt for making that purchase, and it turned out not to be good. And so Young was completely bought by Media General, and then they closed down the Kron plant, you know, the studios and stuff on Van Ness, and now they've moved on top of the KGO building. So they're two separate companies, but Kron leases space in there. So, you know, they do their best, they do a good job, but it was really kind of unfortunate business. They just couldn't agree on keeping up the affiliate status. So NBC actually made a deal with a station in San Jose to become their local affiliate, and that station boosted its transmission power so it could get up to San Francisco. And that station NBC bought after about a year. And they were actually paying NBC $38 million in order to be an NBC affiliate. So they came up with the money, but they couldn't make it work, and NBC bought them. So now they do have an owned and operated station in the Bay Area. Does anybody try to get NBC over the air, like the digital broadcast? No, I cut the cord, and so I can get like ABC and CBS if I want to, you know, just through the digital transmission. But NBC I can't get because it doesn't really, I don't know, wherever I am in the city is blocked from the signal coming up from San Jose. So that's kind of what happened there. A lot of people lost their jobs. The chief engineer in the broadcasting department here, she came over from Kron, and a couple other people did. The lady who used to operate the broadcast head end of our educational TV, she came from Kron, and then she eventually went to work for ESPN. So and our engineer, actually, she's the one who created this streaming classroom with the cameras and everything. She put this together. You know, the ability to, this is basically a studio that feeds over to the broadcasting department, and then they stream it out. So she set all of this up after she left Kron with all of these goings on. They lost a lot of people. Yeah, so that's their story. It can show you how badly things can go, even for a huge company, unfortunately. So that's that story about Kron. So owning versus operating broadcast stations. Owning a station is it's an investment in itself, right? You may just want to have it as an asset and hold on to it and let it appreciate, and then eventually sell it later on. That was in part, I think, what the Young Broadcasting Corporation wanted to do with Kron. They didn't work out. But so you may own a station, but not necessarily want to operate it because you know nothing about operating. So just like you're a farmer who owns land, but you can lease it to somebody else to work it, you can own a station, but have somebody else actually operate it. There are situations both in radio, especially in radio here in the Bay Area, but elsewhere in the country this exists in TV as well, where you may have different owners because the FCC requires, for instance, you can't have the same owner of the big three television network affiliates in certain sized markets. But so maybe different owners, but maybe one company running two of them. So that's called a local marketing agreement, and that means that you may not own that station, but you've leased in order to operate it at the same time. So that's a possibility, which gets around the rules designed to have a diversity of ownership. Then there's something called duopoly. So this is kind of an exceptional situation where one license holder can actually hold two or more stations in the local market area. Now this can happen in radio because it's not against the rules, but it can also happen occasionally in TV, particularly when there's simply no other option. When, if you didn't have the same owner, well, the other, let's say owner number one is really rich and powerful, owner number two is about to go out of business, they're going bankrupt or something, and at that point the FCC would look at it and say, well, we're going to lose that station and that audience is going to certainly lose, so let us authorize and allow a duopoly, which we usually wouldn't allow, but the market demands it. So two or more stations owned by the same group could call that a duopoly. There are other kind of exceptional situations where you can own different kinds of media, but I don't think we need to go that deeply into it. So cross ownership, where if you own a newspaper and a broadcast station in the same market, these cross ownership is becoming more and more common because of consolidation and such. So the FCC prefers diversity, but they will allow things like duopolies when it has to happen. They will allow cross ownership in some markets if the newspaper is struggling, and many of them are. They're going out of business. They will intervene sometimes. Okay, I mean, it is important here to talk about, broadcasters provide news and they also sell advertising. And it's an important principle in broadcasting, what they call the firewall now, I guess, call it a firewall. The firewall between advertising and editorial. Care taken to, make sure that the money-making aspects don't impinge upon the public information aspects. You don't want, for instance, people paying to get on and be interviewed. Okay, no recreating of news events, even though it would look really good. You have to be careful about that. Unnamed sources, that's, carefully kind of dealt with by journalists. There's, a set of ethical concerns around that. In general, you want to always name your sources and always be accountable. And if you don't, it's assumed that someone who's responsible in a news organization will know who the sources are. So when people speak on background, an official in the Trump campaign, somebody knows who that was. The editor of the newspaper knows who that was. In order to get published, you have to give them your notes, you have to give them the information before an editor will actually let you publish, But they may not make that public to protect the source.
Have you ever seen that show, Newsroom, the HBO show?
Was the...
Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin wrote it, and who's the star, or was the star?
Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, Jeff Daniels.
It's
that's
really good, but the whole second season is about like this.
And it's using anonymous sources and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's like an anonymous source they have to deal with, and there's like a bunch of stuff that they have to like vet to like even find out if like they can even begin like to pursue it like they won't. It's like a big story. But if you haven't seen it, you should watch it.
That's pretty cool.
It's super interesting, like just watching like the inner workings of like a newsroom and how like they develop it and like put it to broadcast and stuff.
That is cool. I only saw one kind of really sensationalistic clip where he's ranting about something, and it's, you know, in Sorkin, man. Yeah, it may actually be in the pilot or something.
The person asked him the question about America.
Right. That's right.
That's like the first scene in the whole show.
But it sounds like it's really interesting to learn about how the news is actually produced and some of the issues that rise. Yeah, that's cool. It's a good recommendation. I'd forgotten about it. Thank you. I will check it out. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's probably educational for the general public just to know that, you know, it's not kind of a free-for-all. Like there, you know, even there are people watching out for the integrity of the news, even though they fail sometimes. But they are trying.
That's a big thing in the show. Is like they're trying to like make a show that's like has a lot of integrity, and then this story kind of Well, I don't want to give anything.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Like,
so the second season's worth like...
The whole thing, the first 2 seasons are really good. The third one is like alright. But the second season is just like when they have like...
Long sustained...
Yeah, it's like a long sustained story that they're trying to figure out.
That's cool. I mean, a counter recommendation, but if you're interested in this thing, the thing called a documentary called Page One about the New York Times, really, really good. We could watch maybe a little bit of it at the end of the semester or something. But that's a documentary where they went to the media desk at the New York Times, which is just reporters who cover the media. But at that time, WikiLeaks had put out a video, just dumped it onto YouTube of like a helicopter assault on a square in Baghdad and like all kinds of civilians being killed and stuff. It was like super heavy footage, you know. And they show the reporters at the Times like, you know, like figuring out, oh yeah, this was edited. We got the full version up there that everybody refers to, but actually the one that everyone's freaking out about is an edited version. It's really interesting to see how careful they are about, you know, trying to determine the truth of this stuff, you know, and how careful they are dealing with someone like Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, you know, who obviously has all of his interests that are involved, you know. And lo and behold, now he's like kind of being fingered as a conduit for Russian, you know, Russian emails, or, you know, hacking emails coming out through WikiLeaks. Interesting, anyway. It's like, wow. Oh. Okay. Garbology is searching through trash of a competitor to discover information. It's like looking through celebrities or some of the things that you're not supposed to do. Trying to get competing anchor hired by another market. Okay. So interesting ethical issues. Okay, things that can get you in deep trouble, get you sued, things that you would really want to be careful about. And we do, you know, in the writing class that I teach, we do talk about ethics, and we also talk about libel and slander. So, and in the journalism department, I think they do an even better job about, you know, just teaching and cautioning people who are going to go into news media. But you know, you can get sued and lose a lot of money through defamation, which is a false attack on somebody's reputation. So it can either be libel if it's printed, or slander if it's said on the air or something. So this would be, you know, putting out damaging information that is not true about people. So there's being court cases and such, but in order to sue and win on a case of defamation, you know, the standard is pretty high, which is why you say, well, I see this all the time on Fox or wherever, and MSNBC, they're saying all kinds of terrible things about people. First, it has to show that there's actual malice, that they really want to do wrong to this person, do harm this person. It wasn't just an inadvertent slip. It's like, oh, we didn't know. We thought we were, you know, giving the truth, and it turns out it wasn't. It has to be a reckless disregard for the truth. In other words, you have to you have to be able to demonstrate that they went out of their way not to find out about this. You know, it's like it was such a horrible fact, and they never even looked it up. So disregard for the truth, and the burden of proof is on the person who is bringing the charge. So that means someone who has been defamed has to go to war with Fox and News Corp and all their millions and millions of dollars. So you've got to have the money to fight this and survive it, right? So that is pretty important. Now, some media organizations are sued by the people with all the money. They say, don't say that about me, I'm going to crush you. One of your best defenses to be able to prove that what you said actually is true. It's not defamation if it's true. So that's important. That's one way of sort of winning your case. So if you are a journalistic organization and you are publishing the facts, even about powerful people, if you know you've got the truth on your side, you can be confident eventually you can win, you know. So interesting set of issues around defamation, but certainly anybody who goes on the media should be trained, and they should understand, you know, the consequences that can arise. Okay, so on this slide, we're jumping around a little bit because here we're talking about group ownership, and so we looked at this way back when. I'm sure we've looked at so much. There's so many little facts and data, but after 1996, they raised the ceilings on media ownership. So you may remember that it hovers around a third. For instance, if you're a television ownership group, you're only allowed to own stations in the country that cover 30 to 30 something percent. They were going to raise it a bit. It's around 30% of the population. So, you know, when you apply to buy a new station, they're going to look at, well, what do you own already? And if that gets you over a certain threshold, you're not allowed to buy that station. For radio, they lifted the limits completely in terms of national, but within each DMA, within each market, you're not allowed to own over a certain number of stations. Depends on the size of the market. But consolidation, which means, you know, again, one company buying up another, has led to this situation where there are fewer and fewer owners. You know, there's big owners, like Clear Channel buying 1,000 radio stations and stuff. And many critics see that as like automatically bad. It's just if some you know, company owns, you know, a gigantic amount of a percentage of the U.S. broadcasting industry, they just see that as too much power. So this concept of oligopoly, we hear about Russian oligarchs. When we say that the media interest is oligopolistic, you know, we know that monopoly means that one entity owns something. Mono, right? Mono would be one. Oligopoly means that a few very huge, rich corporations own an enormous amount of the communications industries in the United States. So, you know, that page, which is on the industry news assignment, is, where is it? There it is. I mean, oh my God, I have to get back in here. All this stuff, right? I have to be able to display it a little better. Yeah, these are the companies that, let's look them over. I mean, also in the modules, yeah, I think does this have enough resolution so we can blow it up? This, in terms of TV, is a much nicer kind of infographic, but I mean, it's showing us, you know, CBS and Viacom, which are owned by, I won't even look it up, something entertainments, owned by the Redstone family. So as you can see, CBS, you know, for the last decade, the #1 network, still doing very well, and owned alongside Viacom. And one bit of news that may come out on Thursday, I'm not sure, is that, you know, the The family is looking at linking these up because the executives who've been running CBS have been very effective, and Viacom has been struggling lately, and they're hoping that some of the good practice over here will help out to the Viacom cable networks, which I don't know if they're too far away maybe for you to see, but MTV, BET, so on and so forth. They've been losing a lot of value. What else? Disney. We know Disney is an incredibly powerful player. We've got at least 5 presentations on it coming up on Thursday. So just in terms of TV with ABC and ESPN, which up until a couple of years ago was a hugely successful, the most successful cable channel. So on, and so they've got a lot. They're holding a lot, and then NBC, Comcast, Universal is a very powerful player in its own right, with a lot of cable channels as well as the network, and a stake in Hulu, which they share with some of the other. So wow, as you can see at that level, it's a small number. That's what we mean by oligopoly, right? There's not yet one company that owns all of it. Maybe one day Amazon will own it all. I don't know, but for now, there are those relatively few players, right? And if Time Warner is going to be bought up by a telecom, that's another thing. So this doesn't account for the telecoms, the phone companies who got into broadcasting. Well, not broadcasting, but the provision, let's say, of entertainment a while ago back. So it's a pretty small number. And who owns what? Not WhatsApp. the changing world of entertainment. Who owns what? Columbia Journalism Review. Yeah. So this is a fun site where you can, if it ever loads up, what's up? What's on top here? Select the media company, find out who owns it, so you can go down the list here if you want. It's got a fair bit. So Time Warner owning HBO, all of this stuff, global wide, so on and so forth. So that's an interesting place just to look up, find out who owns who. And then there's more infographics here, which can be fun, but these are consumer goods. That's a different thing. But very interesting always to see what, the degree of consolidation that exists in this business. Let's leave the student view. So let's just see, maybe a few more points, and then we'll try to do a Kahoot today. I know, exciting day, because next class will be taken up with a lot of presentations. It'll be sure as hell a lot more fun than just non-stop slides. Smaller broadcast TV networks. CW is a great example. I was at the NAB in Las Vegas, and there was like a gigantic thing for ION, which is not a network that I would watch much, but even a small network has a huge budget for promoting itself. Yeah, so we, this comes back a little bit. I don't know why it's organized this way. We talked about, the relationship between cable and terrestrial, like affiliates, local stations. So, we talked about, station compensation for being an affiliate, but also the relationship between local affiliate stations and the network, the cable provider, right? So let's say you're a superstation out of Atlanta, or even a network like CBS. The cable operator has to pay you in order to carry your channel or your network. So that's called retransmission, because what does cable do? It takes your terrestrial signal and it retransmits it over a cable so that it looks good to everybody who's on the cable. So retransmission is a big deal. There's also must carry, remember, which that we definitely talked about this. So this is in a market where Comcast comes in. They have to agree to carry all of the all of the large local channels to make sure that they don't cut out local broadcasters by bringing in, you know, an NBC affiliate from somewhere else. You know? What's interesting vaguely about that is, you know, when KNTV became the NBC affiliate down in San Jose, they had been an ABC affiliate, and they switched, went for NBC. And at that point, you know, there was this part of the coast which didn't have an ABC affiliate. What did they do? They allowed the cable operators around there to bring in an external ABC affiliate to kind of fill in. So anyway, let's see how we did with this. And we do always want to get those cahoots out in front of you prior to the quiz, which is coming up, I think, probably next week. We'll definitely review before it. And anyone else wants to join, you're welcome to. So the 1941 report on chain broadcasting led to the creation of ABC. True or false? All right, yes, true, that is correct. So the report on chain broadcasting looked at the current state. They found NBC to be too powerful. They forced them to divest, and ABC was created after that. The FCC will not grant a license to a convicted felon. Good job, that's correct. One of the limitations, you gotta be an American citizen and you can't be a convicted felon. They won't let you. A 30-minute infomercial for a skincare system is an example of what revenue model? Oh, so the correct answer was number 2. So it's a tricky example, I guess. Remember, toll broadcasting would be like when you pay extra to get your message out. So it's basically you have bought time as an infomercial. All right, the oldie program, the Kraft Music Hall, is an example of what? Spot advertising, toll broadcasting, subscription, or sponsorship? Good job, those who got sponsorship, okay? Since the name of the company is in there, the Kraft food company or whatever it is, they're the ones who's sponsoring the shows. They want their name on it, okay? Next up, paying a monthly fee to access Netflix online is an example of what kind of money-making situation? Subscription, sponsorship, toll, spot. All right, woohoo! 6 people get subscription-based, so you're paying a monthly subscription to Netflix.
I know that costs about $9.99 a month.
It's a lot, actually, when you add it up with all the rest. Which of the following is not a component of the broadcast star model? So remember, that was a model that had a few more players than this one. You know? So network affiliated stations, they were in there, the FCC was in there, the audience was in there, was the FTC in there? Who knows? All right, you guys caught me out. Number 4, so FTC stands for the Federal Trade Commission. And they do influence media acquisitions and stuff, but they're not part of the broadcast star model. The broadcast star model is all of these folks who we know are involved in broadcast. Okay, next up. Which of the following would disqualify someone from owning a broadcast station, in addition to being a felon? Owning more than 5 radio stations across the country, not being a U.S. citizen, not living in the town where the station is located, not being at least 40 years of age. Yeah, don't let young people actually have a station.
I think that's
It's ageism. That should be outlawed. All right, whoa, look at you. Everybody got it right. Not being a U.S. citizen is a problem. Yeah.
You did mention it earlier.
I did mention all of this, but I think I was so boring today that people slept through a lot of this. Something refers to a station being owned by one company but operated by another. So remember, typically you're not supposed to have 2, but in some exceptional situations, could it be a local marketing agreement, also known as an LMA? That was tough. Okay, so duopoly refers to something different. I believe we'll have another question on that. But a station being owned by one company but operated by another is like the local marketing agreement. So remember, my example was like somebody owns some land, but they hire out the farmer next door. They allow that person to rent it and operate it. So that's how they do it. Okay. However, Making cable companies pay local TV stations for the right to include the local TV signal is. So the cable operator must pay, right, the local station. What do you call that? Cable content agreement, retransmission consent, payola, must carry. All right. There is a big fraud in there. A big distractor. A big wrong answer. Let's see how many people go for the right one.
Probably got it wrong.
There's always hope. Hope in cahoots.
Oh shit.
Whoa, it was like pretty evenly split. So the correct answer is a retransmission consent. Because so the cable operator wants to retransmit the signal of the local station. So they're going to have to make an agreement. It's like, okay. And so next up. Something refers to a single entity owning more than 2 radio stations in a market. Here's your chance to correct the last one. So a single entity owning more than 2 radio stations. Woohoo, not bad at all. Duopoly, all right? So, yeah, when it comes to ownership, typically not supposed to have more than one, but you will get that. Okay. Owner consolidation led to a media market that is increasingly what? So as there's more and more mergers, that means there's fewer and fewer companies that actually own everything. So what do we call that when it's not there's only one, there's a few, but very few. That is called an oligopoly. Okay, so the correct answer is oligopolistic. So remember, monopoly means only one company owns everything. An oligopoly means that a few companies own everything. So as consolidation happens, you get only a few companies. Which of the following is increasingly being used to select broadcast licensees? So you go to the FCC, you say, I want a broadcast license, and they say, well, we're going to do it this way now because there's so many of you. We're going to just, oh, not bad. At least the majority got auction. So that is the correct answer. Increasingly, they will auction off licenses and make a little money for the government as well. This type of defamation, remember, occurs when the offending statement is spoken. So this is when someone wants to sue you because you said or did something bad. So if you said something bad, what is that called? All right. Whoa, good job. Slander. When people say it, it's slander. When they write it, it's libel. All right. The rule that local cable providers include all over-the-air TV channels in its basic lineup. So that means Comcast comes to San Francisco, they have to put all the local channels in to make sure they don't cut them out. Okay. What would that be? Must carry. Good job. So that is, we must carry all of the local stations. And the last one, your chance to lock it up. To defend against libel, broadcaster can demonstrate that the defamatory statements are true. Is that a good defense? Boring. Excellent. Everybody who voted, you got it. Yep. So that is a good. You can't defame someone if you're telling the truth. And that concludes our thing for today. All right. So please do prepare your presentations for next class, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all the latest news from you guys.